Well, hello everyone and good morning. Welcome to another PlanesTV live broadcast. Doesn't it feel like a long time ago since we did one of these? I think my last was probably September actually for the Duxford show that never was, sadly. I did the virtual show instead. But yeah, really it was the beginning of the year, wasn't it, when we were in lockdown 1, and I was doing them weekly through that period, and they were great fun, and I'm really looking forward to this one. Really great to see all the same characters in the chat over on YouTube. Michael joining us nice and early again. Michael, thank you for being on board again. And who else have I seen over there? Ryan and the other Ian as well, and even my old man. And he makes an appearance on our first little bit of video, which I'm going to play, whilst people join in. It tends to take a little while for people to join the live broadcast, certainly on Facebook, which I'm relieved to see is streaming. Had some fun over there this morning, but it wouldn't be a multi-platform live broadcast without some shenanigans, would it? So we'll kick off, as has become kind of tradition on these things, with a dip right back into the archive. So with the early part of the PlanesTV archive, and it's of course part of our on-demand service. Some content from that, from Humberside Airshow in 1992. Let's actually get it ready, shall we? That would help. And it's a Sea Harrier FRS-1, so I don't think we've got many FRS-1s in the archive. So this one was a no-brainer to kick off the stream today. It's about 5 minutes long, and then I'll fill you in on what we're going to see today. It's going to be about a 2.5 hour broadcast. As I say, all Harrier action from the years, and a couple of interviews, which I'll talk to you more about in just a minute.
The Sea Harrier is derived from the basic Harrier close support aircraft. It is configured primarily for the airborne intercept with Sidewinder missiles and Aiden guns, but can also operate in the anti-shipping role.
You can tell it's from our deepest, darkest archive based on the buzzing noise on that. Sorry about that, but Harry's going to drown it out now.
The Vampire jet car is powered by the same engine as the Nat jet trainer we saw earlier, a Bristol Siddeley Orpheus, and is an effective demonstration of Humberside's new runway extension.
I thought I'd include this this nice bit of the Vampire jet car. It's just a cool airshow act, isn't it? Yeah, decent example of decent way of portraying the runway extension. Good point, Dad. That was my old man Adrian doing the voiceover there on that programme from back in 1992, featuring the Harrier FRS-1 display. Sea Harrier FRS-1. Superb stuff. Hey, this is great. I'm so happy that so many people are joining the stream over on YouTube. It's fantastic to see the same names popping up. Andy, thank you for joining us. And I've welcomed Ryan and Michael. Cara Mason, hello. Good morning. And Facebook as well, which is working. What a relief. Good morning, everyone. So, what are we going to see today? Harrier, lots of it. Pretty well everything. Well, not everything, but a good example of the content that we have in our archive, our own archive, which is based on air shows from the last 30 years. That one, a good example of the very early days. We'll bring things right up to date. As up to date as we can, given we haven't had any air shows this year, to 2019 with some RIAT display action from the Spanish Harriers. And in between, these are the bits I'm really excited about, and I hope you enjoy them too. We have a couple of talks with Art Nalls in America, who brought a Sea Harrier back to flying condition in civilian hands and flew it at air shows throughout America for many years. It's now for sale if you're looking for a Christmas present for me. We'll talk to him, good 20-minute conversation, and hear about that aircraft, what it's like to fly, where he started with Harrier, and a bit about the aircraft that he has there. Has a two-seater as well, and some of the, his stories and his tales about that. It's a fantastic conversation. The other bit I'm really excited about, these live streams have had a good audience through the year, and we've been able to draw attention to some sort of charities and restoration efforts over the time, but I've made a concerted effort this time. So I did my googling and did a bit of research on Harrier restorations out there, and it was fantastic to find a Kestrel restoration ongoing, or in the fairly early stages, at Wings Museum in West Sussex, which I've spent a lot of time not far away from with family down there, and hadn't come across before. So I spent a good 25 minutes chatting to Aaron and Dan down there, and they'll fill us in on the bit about the museum, a bit about the Kestrel project, and how you might be able to support. And that's the bit that I'm really excited about, the possibility that some of you might share my thrill to find that there's a Kestrel under restoration. It's an airframe that was used by NASA, in fact damaged by them sadly, spent some time in a paintball field, but I'll leave the guys to talk about that in due course. I thought we might start it off in kind of chronological order, or on that Kestrel end of the spectrum, with the only time that we've sort of featured a Kestrel in our airshow videos at all, and this was Cosford in 2014, where the only other Kestrel in the UK is in wonderful condition at the RAF Museum, and in 2014 for the airshow they wheeled it out to get a bit of sunshine. Let's take a look, and it was alongside a bunch of other aircraft representing the other marks of Harrier as well. Pete, who you will recognise probably, will guide us through it now.
A rare treat in the static display now, a wonderful array of Harriers.
Hi, I'm Peter Riok, and I'm the Air Operations Assistant for the 2014 RAF Cosford Airshow. So this year is the 50th anniversary of the Kestrel aircraft taking its first flight. We wanted to celebrate this as there is a Kestrel in the RAF Museum at Cosford. So we've tried to put together as many Harrier variants as possible, and today we have 4 Harrier variants, including the Kestrel prototype, on display for the public. Obviously, due to the short runway length for Cosford, we can't bring in as many visiting static aircraft as other airshows, so we like to do different with what we have to hand, and we believe the Harrier display this year is something unique for our visitors to see. For the visitors, I think it'd be nice to them to see the Harrier variants for how they've progressed and changed in size and shape through the years, from the Kestrel prototype to the larger GR3, the Sea Harrier variant, and also the GR9 as it finished, which is a lot larger aircraft than the Kestrel that it proceeded from. With this display, we've tried to make all the aircraft as authentic as possible. So the GR3 is tooled up as it would in the Falklands War. It's been repainted to replicate an aircraft deployed with hand-painted tail number, and even goes down to the authenticity of having the special Falkland Islands bump below the nose, which was adapted for ship searching radar. When we at Cosford received the GR9, it didn't have any markings, so we've applied special markings. On one side it's got the RAF markings of 4 Squadron, and on the other side it's marked up as a Naval Strike Wing fighter from 800 Naval Air Squadron, to show how the GR9 and Joint Force Harrier was a dual service project. We're glad we could put on such a unique display of these 4 Harrier aircraft, and it's probably something that will never be seen again, so hopefully the public enjoyed seeing them all out on display at the RAF Cosford 2014 Airshow.
Yeah, pretty unique sight at an air show. I don't think, as we said, probably not something we'll see again. GR3 that will be its only feature in this this stream, I think. I don't think. Adrian, my father, who started this business, is in the chat. He can tell me if he's got some in the archive somewhere, but I don't think we've got any flying GR3 in the archive. So that Kestrel and the other Kestrel Restoration project going on in the UK, that's where we're heading now to talk to the guys at the Wings Museum. It's a bit of a long conversation this, but I hope an interesting one. I should have also said at the beginning, we'll have lots of flying here, but this 25 minutes is just chat, so forgive us that. We've had a bit of Pegasus noise already. We'll have plenty more throughout the day, throughout the couple of hours that we'll run for. The other bit that I'm really excited about, there's the Art Nalls conversation coming up at about, if I'm on time, and I can't have slipped already, about 12. So we're going for a long broadcast here, guys. Leave me on in the background while you get on with your day. So Art's on at about 12, and then later on, around about 10 to 1, we'll also have a full Harrier display from the cockpit. So this is a program we made in 2006, and it's talked through by Pete Keenlyside, just talking about a bit of head-up display, a bit of in-cockpit, and it gives a really good sense of what it's like to throw a Harrier through a display routine. So there's that to look forward to, but first we'll talk to Aaron and Dan at the Wings Museum in West Sussex about their Kestrel restoration. Enjoy this. Gents, thank you very much for joining me. Tell me a little bit about the museum first of all.
I'll introduce the museum. The museum has been in its present location for just coming up to about 13 years. One of the things that we sort of emphasise on at the moment is World War II. And a very important part of the museum work is the restoration work that we've done. And up until now, it's primarily focused on World War II types. And we're quite lucky being located near Gatwick Airport that we get some, aircraft engineers volunteer and make their time available to us. We've got quite a good equipped workshop as well, which, really does help as well. But we are all volunteers here at the museum. And we sort of call ourselves a remembrance museum because the museum is about the people and the personal stories, not just the airframes, the parts and the equipment, but very much the emphasis is on the people. And I think our visitors like that. There's so much here to see that there's big exhibits, small exhibits. There's literally hundreds of personal stories here at the museum.
And tell me a little bit about those exhibits that you do have, obviously focused on World War II, B-25 and other bits and pieces?
Yes, one of our sort of centrepiece displays at the moment is a C-47 fuselage, a Dakota or a Skytrain as the Americans called it. And that was actually used in the filming of Band of Brothers when it was with a film company. So visitors can actually walk inside that. And it's probably one of the few airframes that is accessible for wheelchairs as well, which is really nice. That goes very well with our school visits as well. We actually do a schools workshop, which is called the D-Day experience. And we get them all to take up the positions of the paratroopers, get them to kind of contemplate how they might be feeling, flying over to France and going into combat for the first time. And then at the end we get them to demonstrate the kind of the sort of hook up scenario where they kind of hook up, do an equipment check, and then they all go running out of it yelling. And they love it, and I think that's what we find is that actually as the new generation emerges, and it's going to be down to them to kind of carry the message of remembrance forward into kind of subsequent sort of decades. But we find the museum and what's in the museum is what kind of connects to them. Whereas if you had just a history book and plonked that in front of them, they would be fairly disinterested. But I think when they're able to explore a museum such as ours, they see things that kind of get their interest and it kind of leads them in. But we've also got we got a cockpit from a Douglas A-26 Invader, and that actually served in World War II. We made contact with the pilot that flew it during 1944. He flew 13 missions in it. We believe it went on to Korea, but we are certain that it then went on to Vietnam. So it's quite remarkable that it's been through all that and survived. But like many of these things, they spend a lot of time where they're kind of uncared for, abandoned, and if they're in our kind of elements, you know, such as they are now, if I look out the door of the museum right now, it's pretty horrible out there. So, you know, we are always, with World War II types in particular, battling corrosion. So a lot of our restoration work is focused around cutting that out and replacing it. We like to use solid rivets and try and do things as near as we can, but bearing in mind these airframes were kind of mass produced using massive sort of rubber presses, and of course we don't have that now, so we're kind of replicating it on a one-off basis. We've got trying to think we've had a recent addition this year which has kind of gone missed a little bit because of the COVID-19 thing. It arrived just before lockdown, but that was a Bristol Beaufort cockpit that's here at the museum. We have a Beaufighter cockpit, Bristol Beaufighter, a Mark 1F. That's in our Red Hill section. P-63 King Cobras.
Well, you're whetting my appetite very nicely, and I should have started with an apology about not having visited the museum before. I mentioned earlier, before we started recording the call, that you know, I've spent a lot of time, about 20 minutes away from you, and never come across you. And both of those types I need to come and see, the Beaufort, the Beaufighter. My daughter's called Beau, and this is my route to get her interested in aircraft. Is telling
Let's hope not a fighter.
Oh, she is. She's got an older brother and she can hold her own, let me tell you. Yeah, so we'll have to come and have a look at those. And it's interesting. Do. Yeah, and it's interesting you talking about the you know, the aircraft, the state that aircraft end up in, and the work that you do to restore them. That probably brings us on nicely to the Harrier and the state that you found that in. And tell us a little bit about that airframe and how you found it.
You want me to just
please
do. I'll introduce the kind of background, and I'll hand over to Aaron, who's a little bit more kind of up with the technicalities of it. But we have future plans here at the museum, and basically they are sort of fairly long term. It's quite a big project, but it would see more display space for the museum, because we are getting quite tight now on exhibition space and also workshop space. So we have future plans to expand the museum, and it will take us into the post-war era. And the reason that our Kestrel is so important to us is that we plan to move the museum in the long term to Dunsfold Aerodrome, where the museum has acquired some land and has recently been granted an outline planning permission to establish a museum there. But of course, we only get one chance at this. It's a massive project. It will take some time, so we are thinking ahead here. But I was actually in Belgium with the other trustees at the time, and we'd gone out for a meal, and I was sitting there kind of being really Mr. Antisocial as I am, and scrolling through my phone. And on one of the Facebook pages, this Kestrel sort of come up, and it was photographed sort of with its wings on at that time. I think the photographs was when it was at the paintball site. And I kind of, well, we all recognised that, you know, there aren't many Kestrels around. It's a very iconic aircraft for Dunsfold, and really there isn't going to be any more opportunities to acquire such an airframe. But so within about half an hour, we'd actually negotiated the price and we'd actually acquired it. But it took quite a bit more time to actually get it imported into England for it to return home.
I'm sure.
Although there were a few people in America that claimed that it was designed in America, built in America, and it should stay in America. So yeah, clearly they hadn't discovered Google, but I think it was quite a privilege to return it back to the UK. And I suppose that leads on nicely to what it was doing out in America, which I'll hand over to Aaron Simmons, who's the kind of project leader on this project.
Yeah, hello. The aircraft was one of 9 Kestrels built just after the 6 P1127s, and there's a lot of people that think the P1127 and the Kestrel are the same aircraft, and they're not. There's a major amount of differences. It's too long to go into, but it's basically a complete redesign. And then obviously when the Harrier came along, that was once again a complete redesign. The aircraft first flew on 10th of December 1964 from Dunsfold. It was built at Kingston and then just transported to Dunsfold for final assembly and first flew. It was the first aircraft that was delivered to the Tripartite evaluation squadron, and then it actually went back to Dunsfold for some modification work. I think it was engine modification work before being re-delivered. After the evaluations were done, the aircraft were split up. Some went to the States, some stayed in the UK. West Germany didn't have any. So the aircraft went to the States, I think it was January 1966, and then it became 64-18268. That was its new serial number. It was there for a little while, and then NASA acquired it. And it became NASA 520.
This is the coolest aspect of this airplane to me. You know, you talk about cool aviation things. You combine NASA with Harrier, and you suddenly hit the goldmine, as far as I'm concerned.
Exactly. And unfortunately, it was doing some testing, and it had a ground loop incident. It was 27th of August 1967, and the pilot flying it was a Lee H. Pearson Jr., who later became chief test pilot of NASA and was involved in the Apollo missions. So it's got quite a vast history. And it was obviously written off because I think it's the starboard outrigger dug into the ground and flung round, did quite a bit of damage there, did some damage to the nose. The canopy emergency release didn't actually work, so they had to break the canopy to get Lee H. Pearson out. Not much damage other than that. If the aircraft had stayed with that amount of damage, it would have been a lot nicer. But unfortunately, it went between a few owners. I think it went to Tom Riley's Flying Tigers Museum. Am I correct there?
Yeah.
That was in Florida, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, in Florida. It was there for a little while, obviously dismantled, never really put on display. Then I think it went to another private owner before going to a paintball field, where most of its damage has occurred. Unfortunately, the nose was completely trashed, so much that we're actually having to roll new skins for it, which is a real shame. The undercarriage has gone missing. which is a real shame. We're trying to get a set. We know somewhere where there are 3 sets of undercarriage, but they're playing hardball at the moment. Shall I name it? It's
Tempting.
the RAF Museum.
Okay.
Just in their store, they've got, I think, 3 nose gear, 2 main gear for Kestrels. But
I mean,
yeah,
they've got
And there are no other Kestrels that need them other than ours. So
well, that's what I was
exactly.
going to say. Yeah, they've got the wonderful aircraft up there, which we saw outside a few years ago. I've included a bit of video of the aircraft on static display at Cosford. Yeah, come on, RAF Museum.
Exactly.
yeah, we'll give you a good mention.
Our aircraft hasn't actually got its original wing either. The 694's wing is actually on the Kestrel that's hanging up in Langley. So for some reason they did a wing swap, but someone, a previous owner, has actually managed to make our job even harder by cutting the wing in half, which is not very nice. We have got plans to repair it, and we're lucky enough to have a ex-Harrier structural engineer who's helping us.
Wow.
So he still works for BAE, so what's really good. What was I going to say? We have recently acquired a P1127 wing from Brooklands Museum. We thank them for that. So that's going to make our life a lot easier, because we can actually fit that to our aircraft whilst we repair our wing, and it'll actually make repairing our wing a lot easier, because we can jig it and do the repairs, and then all the flaps and ailerons are exactly the same, so we can actually swap everything over. What else?
I suppose really the aircraft doesn't have its main gear at the moment. It's not to say that Harrier ones couldn't be adapted, but they're not quite the same. But it's not uncommon for these Kestrels and 1127s to have Harrier parts fitted to them. There's a lot of aircraft in national museums that have got Harrier bits hiding there. So really what we're in need of is a tail fin, and a Harrier one would fit. It might need a little bit of modification, some horizontal tailplane. The wing section we're actually okay with. The undercarriage, we're hopeful that we can actually acquire the ones that are kind of in storage with the RAF Museum, because we know that ultimately they're really nice people, and I'm sure they'd love to support a project like this. So
engine doors as well.
Yeah, and an engine door we could do with. We're quite. We got the cockpit panels now. The lower panels were fortunately still in the aircraft. So we've actually had the upper instrument panels laser cut, and we're just populating those now. But the cockpit was removed from the main fuselage because it is a production break, and in its landing mishap, it had actually suffered a fracture on one of the intakes, so it was partially removed anyway. So it needed to come off to carry out that repair. But it also enabled the cockpit to go to Aaron Simmons' workshop in his back garden, where over the lockdown he was able to sort of press ahead with getting it ready so that the new skins can be formed. And, you know, it's kind of at its worst at the moment because everything's been removed from it. We're actually having to get a specialist, Aaron I know more, but basically a specialist who will roll the skins on an English wheel. We have the English wheel here at the museum, but what we don't have is the people who know how to use it. So he will actually, in due course, be coming here to the museum, and we are paying for his services, because obviously talent like that comes at a cost. And, you know, that brings us nicely onto the subject of kind of money. We are looking to raise funds for this project, because we have quite a few projects on the go here at the museum, and you know, the more kind of funding we can get on board, the more things like getting this chap to roll the skins we can do, which will save an awful lot of time. And he's actually used to work on Harriers forming skins, so you know he will do a really nice job, and it will transform that cockpit. But those kind of compound curves we couldn't do here ourselves. We kind of had to hold our hands up on that one, and this is where the funding comes in, is that there are things that we can do, and there are things that we probably could, but how long would it take?
And how much expense in waste material.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The scrap bin might end up quite full.
Yes. Well, it's quite a shopping list of parts you've got there. But as you say, the way these things go, isn't it? It's sort of people being supportive of each other and sort of helping and focusing on things. But the funding then is clearly going to make the difference for this airframe, isn't it? And I know you've set up a GoFundMe specifically for the Kestrel. I'll include a link, of course, in the description below. But that money's going towards that airframe, is it? And particularly for that work with the English wheel and the rolling the skin.
Yeah, if I mean, any money that we do get donated for that project, we ensure that that's where it goes. But I suppose we've kind of been through this lockdown and sort of asking for money. I mean, everybody's asking for money right now, so. I think the sort of COVID thing hasn't really helped the project, but it needs more promotion. I mean, people can help us as well by just looking up our page on Facebook, sharing it to groups, just getting the word out there. I believe you heard about us through something sort of similar, so it's that snowball effect. You know, that once the snowball starts rolling down the hill, you know, things sort of start to happen. And like with Brooklyn's support, I mean, that was a massive coup, really. I mean, I would say that that's probably the only wing section probably in the world that, you know, that would fit our aircraft. And we're really grateful to them for that. We actually removed that from the museum about 5 or 6 weeks ago. So, yeah, and it's in really good condition. I mean, they've really looked after it. So that itself doesn't actually need any work at all. It's ready to fit. So it'll take the pressure off on the original wings. And they're not too bad to repair, but the hardest thing is going to be that's going to need a jig to make sure that they go back together properly.
Yes.
They're easy enough to join back together, but it's getting it joined back together how it should be so it fits the airframe. So it'll enable us to kind of take our time on that one. And so we got a lot of work, but you know, I suppose we're kind of used to that. If you're into historic aircraft, you know, then this is kind of part and parcel of what you do. And for some reason, we tend to pick very rare aircraft, which makes life even harder.
Well,
I mean, had it been a Hunter or something like that, I think it would be a lot easier. But
yeah, well, another nice Hawker type. Yeah, and it's interesting you talking about. I hadn't realised that plan with Dunsfold. So very many of members of our audience will remember the air shows that we've spent a lot of time filming over the years, and the idea of taking a Kestrel and museum back to Dunsfold, a site that's I haven't kept my ear to the ground too well on Dunsfold, but I don't think it's an airfield for much longer if it is still. And the idea that there could be a bit of the history of Hawker left there would be superb, wouldn't it? And it sounds like you're making steps in that direction.
And we've actually started with the hardest 2 aircraft to get for Dunsfold. Not only the Kestrel, you mentioned it earlier. We've got the B-25.
Yeah, the B-25 Mitchell. We have the whole airframe there, so we're kind of focusing on the wings and the cockpit at the moment. So that's another project that we're doing here at the museum. So we are a bit of a glutton for punishment, really. But we find visitors love seeing projects. They will come back in like 6 or 8 months' time just to see how it's going. And I think it sort of keeps the museum alive rather than just being a static group of exhibits that never changes. you know, we're always striving to improve what we have, to add to what we have. So there's always something different here, you know. In fact, today we are moving things around again, as we always seem to be doing that, to kind of shift things around to get more things in the workshop. So yeah, it's I think it's, although it has its challenges, you know, I think it's an important part of the museum work. You know, these airframes, some of them are kind of its last chance saloon, you know, and they're historically important, that they need to be rescued and saved, and most importantly, they need to be on public display.
Absolutely. And tell me where people can follow you, follow that work, and hopefully in due course come for a visit. And I'm assuming we're not sending people to Aaron's workshop, his back garden, are we?
No, the Kestrel cockpit's actually going to come back to the museum hopefully in the next 2 weeks. We've got a engine rollover stand, and we've got one of our volunteers in today, and he's actually extending it for us. So sorry if you can hear a grinder in the background. So the cockpit's going to go into that to make our life easier, so we can completely roll it over to do the skin work. And there's quite a bit of internal work on the underside as well, which is, the access isn't very good. As any former Harrier engineer will know, the Harrier is a bit of a nightmare to work on, or any British aircraft. And you can follow the projects. We've got a Wings Museum Facebook page, but we've also got individual Facebook pages for the projects. So the B-25's got one, the Kestrel's got one, the A-26 has got one, but that's slowed down now because it's pretty much complete. The P-63's got one. We're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, all the social media.
So just look out for Wings Museum.
As well.
Just Wings Museum on most of those platforms, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah.
Got it. Well, fantastic. Well, thank you very much, gents, for making the time. And as I say, I will include that link to the GoFundMe, but it sounds like you're well spread across social media so people can follow the projects of their choosing. Yep. And like me, one day come for a visit. Thanks again.
Please do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Well, my thanks again for the guys to spend that time with me just yesterday afternoon, actually, talking about that wonderful project, the idea of restoring a Kestrel to museum standard and taking it back to Dunsfold Museum. There would be just superb. I'm really thrilled to have found the guys and that operation there. As Dan mentioned, they're based close to Gatwick, so they have very many volunteers who are aviation engineers, you know, on modern day aircraft, of course, but transferable skills to restoring older ones, no doubt. And a very, you know, that Kestrel's found itself at the perfect home, I suspect. So it's worth your support. Certainly do seek them out on social media. Well worth a follow. And if you felt like supporting financially, I've included a link to the GoFundMe in the description of this video, both on Facebook and YouTube, and you can visit the page there. And it would be wonderful if I refreshed this page in a minute and found the total had gone up just a little bit. Let's see what we can do to help the guys out. It's obviously a fantastic project. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about the history. So obviously our archive only goes back to the early 90s, late 80s, just about. The old man tells me we have got some GR3 sat in the archive somewhere, but I haven't been able to dig that out today. But a story that many people will remember would be the transatlantic race the Harrier was involved with, and at Riyadh in, was it just last year, 2019? Honestly, with the way this year's gone, my memory's not the best ever, but the way this year's gone, the airshow seasons of past have slipped into the back of my brain. But here's a couple of minutes of the pilot, or a little feature we did on the Riyadh, I think 2019 programme. Could it have been 2018? We'll find out in a minute, I dare say. Tom Lecky Thompson, who flew that Harrier, who won the race, if you like, over to the US and back, was it? We'll find out in a moment. Let's take a look at that feature before we get a bit more flying action of the Spanish Harriers at Farnborough in just a couple of minutes.
Riyadh 2019 provided the rare opportunity for two generations of Harrier pilots to meet. We were thrilled to have the Spanish Navy pilots displaying their aircraft, and they were able to share their experiences of flying the EAV-8B model with Tom Leckie-Thompson. Tom piloted an early Harrier GR1 model in the 1969 transatlantic air race between London and New York, taking off from a coal yard at St Pancras Station and landing vertically in Lower Manhattan.
My name is Tom Leckie-Thompson. My initials are Tom L. Leckie-Thompson, standing for Tom Leslie Leckie-Thompson. And I was born in Burma in 1935, came to UK in 1944. I joined the Air Training Corps at Abingdon, and I achieved a flying scholarship when I was 16 years old, and I got my private pilot's license when I was 17. I then managed to join the Royal Air Force. I'm here today to help celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Harrier crossing the Atlantic in the air race. I flew across in 1969, and now it's 50 years on from there. I think it's marvellous to see them flying in England, and I'm so pleased that the Spanish Air Force like them so much. And I think that the rest of the world who have bought the Harrier have found it a very successful aircraft and very, very useful, because its job as close air support is absolutely ideal. I prefer to say that you can thank the big team that UK had in 1969 that made it all work. From the government down to the designers, the engineers, air traffickers, you name it, everyone acted as a team to make it work. And I'm so proud to have been part of that team to help sell the Harrier. Do you know, it was even easier to hover and fly in the hover than a helicopter was, because I had to learn to fly a helicopter before I could fly the Harrier. It's my second time at Fairford, and it's the first time here for this particular show today, and I find it fascinating. There's so many different aircraft here, and the air show, when you look at it and what's being done, it's so interesting for the general public. I think it's marvellous to keep this sort of interest going.
A fantastic occasion that was in 2019. We got there in the end to find that out. That was a segment from one of the special features of our React 2019 programme, which is one of very many that are available on watch.planestv.com. I've got a nice title, yeah. So if you're enjoying what you're seeing here and you'd like to see more of our archive of airshow stretching back 30 years, do visit watch.planestv.com. It's a subscription service. And I'm thinking I might give an offer code. If we get to, what should we say? If we get 50 shares on Facebook. So if you're watching on Facebook, do give the video a share. If we get 50 shares over there, and let's say 100 likes. Don't tell me we're already at 100 likes. We've had 33 likes on YouTube. Get that up to 100. And if we get 50 shares over on Facebook, I'll share an offer code to get you, what should we say? Half price for 3 months on the PTV On Demand service. Provide some winter entertainment, hopefully. Speaking of which, let's have a bit more flying action, shall we? We haven't had any for a little while. We started the stream with the Sea Harrier. We're going to go to the AV-8B Matador, Harrier 2, the Spanish Navy, at Farnborough in 2014. This is the segment from the 2014 Farnborough programme that we produced featuring that aeroplane. Let's take a look.
The Spanish Navy presented a familiar sight to many spectators at the show. The EAV-8B Matador 2 Plus, or Harrier to many, was a sight for sore eyes in the skies above Farnborough following the type's retirement from RAF service in 2010.
Yeah, good afternoon, and this is Narciso Donoso from the Spanish Navy, Harrier pilot, and I would like to thank the Farnborough International Limited organization for giving us the choice of being here and being part of this wonderful air show. And all the people is treating us very, very, real well. And for me, I'm a Spanish Navy Harrier pilot. I've been in the Navy since 1998, and I'm Harrier pilot since about 5 to 6 years ago. Currently, our squadron is based at the Naval Air Station of Rota in the south of Spain. So we mainly operate from there. And when our carrier, the Juan Carlos I, goes under sea, we operate with him the whole time. So we are part of the aircraft carrier. So as soon as he goes out, we go with him, or excuse me, with her. You really enjoy flying the aircraft, especially its nature, flying at sea, where even though the mission you always have to take off and land on the carrier, so it gets real nice, you enjoy it a lot. It's very demanding sometimes because of the complexity of have all the parameters under control, but you definitely like it.
This is from the Spanish Navy, and again it's wonderful to see this classic site, and indeed the lease of life has been extended on the AV-8Bs in the Spanish Navy for many more years to come. Yeah, the Spanish government found about 70 million euros down the back of the sofa, and they've given it to the Spanish Navy, and it's going to extend the operational life of this aircraft out to 2025. It is an amazing sight, just hanging there, almost as Michael just said in my earpiece, just like he's suspended on a wire, on a cable, just hanging there like a bit of stage set. But actually, it was wonderful, wasn't it, Michael?
Oh, it blew my mind. I mean, just to see it, I've seen it a few times before, of course, but every time it's just as enjoyable and just as impressive.
Well, we'll also get a short landing roll. Not going to do a vertical landing roll because we want to preserve the tarmac here at the airfield for tag. They've got a busy week coming up. But you get a short landing run as he comes back in from a steep approach.
Fabulous sight there on board the Harrier of the Spanish Navy. And I don't normally like those helmet camera views where the camera's following a pilot's helmet around, although they seem to really work there on the Harrier. I don't know, on a big screen sometimes it can be a bit disorientating. We'll see later on a full RAF Harrier display from 2006 or 5 I think, which will be talked through by the pilot, Pete Keenlyside. The 2 fixed cameras, and it's 2006 quality as opposed to 2014 quality, which that one was. But I think it's a really engaging quarter of an hour of Harrier flying display talked through by the pilot. So there's that to look forward to at about, sorry, should have checked. The talk through is coming up at probably about 1:45. And in about just 10 or 12 minutes, we're going to go to that interview I did with Art Nalls a couple of days ago about his Sea Harrier operation in the US. And I noted there was some chat on the YouTube chat about, shouldn't we have a Harrier still flying in the UK, and how the RAF should maybe have one flying like they did the Vulcan. Well, military budgets being what they are, it's not been possible, but if you want the slimmest possible hope of a Harrier flying again in the UK, I think that conversation with Nalls should answer some questions. We'll have a bit more Spanish Harrier action now, or Matador action I should say. The duo that flew at Riet in 2019, and I'm enjoying featuring these more recent, in fact this is the only bit of content of our very recent programmes, just because the production quality is that bit higher, I think, so I'm quite proud of this little segment on the Harriers at Riet in 2019.
The efforts of the Spanish Navy in providing 2 specially marked EAV-8B Harrier 2s for the flying display earned them the RAF CTE Outstanding Contribution Award.
I'm Lieutenant Andres Sandy Medina. I'm from the 9th Squadron, Spanish Navy. I'm posted in Rota. I'm a Harrier pilot. I fly one of these from the Rota base. Sometimes when we get deployed in our carrier, Spanish carrier Juan Carlos I, we sail aboard and we operate from them. This aircraft is a little bit tricky. We believe that it's the last real pilot aircraft because you have to fly all the way to touchdown. It will not forgive you a mistake, but it's a very, very enjoyable aircraft to fly, and we love it.
The P1127 made its first conventional takeoff and landing in March 1961, and that September, its first transition from vertical into wing-borne flight. Here come the 2 Spanish Harriers from the left. This version of Harrier very, very much manually flown. Indeed, in the Royal Air Force, our Harrier pilots did a short course at Shawbury to learn to hover in the training aircraft at the time. Very, very difficult transition to make when you're a fast jet pilot. You've been used to going through training, flying at 420 knots in a Hawk at low level, to then consider an aircraft that is capable of flying at 600 knots but also hovering at 0 speed is actually quite a difficult concept to get your head around. So the initial part of that manoeuvre flown at about 90% RPM, and you can see as the engines were brought up to full power, the angle that the smoke came away from the airframe at, initially at about 70 degrees, and then ultimately as the aircraft transitions into full wing-borne flight, back to the 0 position, pointing fully aft. Of course, the Harrier's most famous shipborne exploits were in the Falklands. 28 Royal Navy Sea Harriers, which were only just in service, deployed on board HMS Hermes and Invincible to the South Atlantic, as well as 14 RAF Harrier GR3s also on Hermes. The Sea Harriers flew just under 2,200 sorties during that campaign. They put up a very effective air defence shield for the British task force and shot down 23 Argentinian aircraft. The GR3s arrived later and flew 125 sorties, but they dropped ordnance on all of them. So you mentioned earlier, Ben, that the nozzles can go anywhere between 0, which is fully aft, and 98 degrees. So in essence, at that point, about 8% or 10% of the aircraft's thrust that's coming out of the engine is actually going forward, which will decelerate the aircraft massively, which led to the phrase of VIFing, which became very famous during the Falklands War, which stood for vectoring in forward flight.
very useful in air combat. It was, although the tactical relevance of it, I think the jury is still out on that one. I think it was more for the tabloids. Two pilots for that demonstration, Lieutenant Andreas Medina and Commander Manuel Rodriguez Guiner, both from the 9th Squadron of the Spanish Navy at Rota on the McDonnell Douglas EAV-8B Harrier 2+. So both the aircraft now configured for what is termed as a slow landing. That'll be the flaps in the stall position. The nozzle's at 60 degrees, so about half of the thrust is going backwards and about half of the thrust is keeping the aircraft airborne with a speed over the ground of approximately 90 knots.
For one of the two pilots, Commander Morrow, his display on Sunday was his last ever Harrier flight, hopefully made all the more memorable by the water arch salute.
Superb end to his flying display career there. And talking of which, so I said AV-8B earlier, didn't I? EAVB. Oh god, I'm lost in Harrier marks. But we're heading back to Sea Harrier. Oh gosh, this has got its own trouble with FRS2 and FA2. We're heading back to Sea Harrier finale. So Yeovilton in 2000. Oh no, I'm terrible on dates, aren't I? Got to be 2005. Was the final air day for the Sea Harrier, and this segment, if you'll watch my streams through the full year, you'll have probably seen this segment on the Air Day Rewind we did in July, but I couldn't resist including it here, and it feeds in nicely to the conversation with Art Nalls, which will be in about 6 minutes time, who got one of these aircraft flying again in the US, and as I said earlier, it's available for sale. And someone else has pointed out that there are restoration projects ongoing in the UK. St Athan, there's a couple of airframes there, you know, aiming for flight status. It's a tricky thing to try and accomplish with sort of rules and regs as they are in the UK, but we can but hope, can't we? Let's head back now to 2005, when Sea Harriers and Harriers in general were very much still on the display circuit. This is the Sea Harrier finale at Air Day that year.
And now it's time to say farewell to the Sea Harrier, the aircraft that brought the Royal Navy back into fixed-wing flying when they thought they might never do it again.
Turning onto the runway at the left-hand end, for the last time, ladies and gentlemen, 801 Naval Air Squadron and their four-ship formation of SHARS, the abbreviation for the Sea Harrier. This must be pretty sad for you, David, I should think.
The Royal Navy's operated fighters for 90 years, and for 25 of those, the Sea Harrier has been it. That's quite a record.
And of course the extraordinary thing is that they won't have a fighter after this, because the aircraft that replaces it, the GR7 and GR9, 7A and 9A Harriers, the RAF version does not have a radar, so they won't have an air defence capability as they have now until they get the Joint Strike Fighter, maybe in 2012. Of course, there is a point to be made that there are other ways of air defence, but it is still a significant event, the end of the Sea Harrier era. So the three are rolling now for their short takeoff. And there goes Brett, off the end into the ski jump. Still is an extraordinary aeroplane, the Harrier, truly unique. The world's only operationally viable fighter capable of vertical and short takeoff and landing. 45 years ago, in 1960, that the forebear of this aircraft, the Hawker P1127, first flew in the hover. In all of that time, nobody else has been able to make the V-STOL concept work satisfactorily for a fighter. The early Harriers were criticised for not being able to. The Americans would say it could just about carry a Coke bottle around the airfield. But of course the later versions have considerably improved on that. So here they are, ladies and gentlemen, 801 Naval Air Squadron, the Sea Harrier. So they're coming in for a run-in and break. This is what they would normally do at the end of a sortie. Come in fast and break to separate out so that when they're doing their landing they are able to land in stream. But here they're doing it as part of their display. Is it, ladies and gentlemen, probably the last time you will see the Sea Harrier displayed after years of very distinguished service.
Well, a sad occasion, and I'm afraid we'll end this stream on another sad occasion, the final RAF flights of the Harrier in RAF hands at Cottesmore in 2010. That was sort of coming on for 10 years ago, and that's what's provoked this stream today. Actually, it was on Thursday, the 60th anniversary of the first untethered hover, the P1127, and yeah, coming up on 10 years since the aircraft was retired from RAF service, so felt like a good idea. If you've got requests for other broadcasts like this, or live streams like this, featuring a specific aircraft or event, or yeah, any other ideas you'd like to swing my way, do leave a comment. And there's also the email newsletter, which I send out once a week. I may send one out on Tuesday this week as well, just covering some of what we talked about today. I'd like to draw more attention to the Kestrel project, but you can sign up for that. It's in there's a link to sign up to the email newsletter in the description of this video. Keeps you in touch with me. Well, keeps me in touch with you. It's me that sends them out, and if you hit reply, it does come to my inbox, and I do try and reply to everyone. Not always as quickly as I'd like, so thank you to those who have kept in contact through the summer, and yeah, apologies if I've not replied to everyone, but that's a good way of getting a conversation going, you know, and it's where some ideas come from. So do sign up for those. We are coming up, we have got a full REF display to look forward to, which is talked through by the pilot. It's around about 1:45 probably. Times are slipping a little. Oh no, we're on target. But now we're going to hear from Art Nalls. Now, this conversation took place a couple of days ago, and calendars of his calendar and my calendar conflicting led to me recording it at home in what was my daughter's bedroom until very recently. So audio quality is not what I'd like it to be, but a really interesting conversation. I started off by asking where it all started for Art.
Where did your time start with Harrier? Where did you first meet the Harrier?
The first time I ever saw a Harrier, and that, by the way, I would like to make this point, that there's lots of great airplanes out there, but almost everybody remembers where they were and what they were doing the first time they saw a Harrier. I was a midshipman at the United States Naval Academy, and they announced that a Harrier was good. There's a big parade field at the Academy. And they announced at evening dinner that there was going to be a Harrier fly in to over the grass field and do a touch and go or a hover, do some flying, and then depart the airplane. So depart the pattern. So I, along with hundreds of other midshipmen, rushed out to the airfield, not knowing what to expect. We'd heard about the Harrier, we'd never actually seen one. I'd never actually seen one. And this airplane came in and stopped relatively close to where I was. I remember having to hold on to my hat because things were being sand and grass and everything was being blown all over the place. And it was unbelievably loud, but to look up there about 100 feet in the air and see a 12-ton airplane just motionless there, and he maneuvered it around and then took off like a rocket. I didn't really know what to expect, and I didn't really know how to digest all the information that I just observed.
I did also want to say that the network connection to Art was not ideal as well, so there will be a bit of a dropout, but we can hear him throughout, so that's the important bit. And what he was saying there, we've all had moments, we all have that moment, don't we, of Harrier memories where we first saw the aircraft. Mine are screaming at my sister, unable to hear each other, stood while the Harrier hovered not very far away. Just the sheer noise of the thing, what a beast. Let's get back on with Nalls. I continue the conversation by asking about his transition to flying the aircraft. Oh, and I did mean to say, let me know your memories in the comments of seeing the Harrier for the first time, and remember to like the video on YouTube and share it on Facebook. If we hit 100 likes over on YouTube and 50 shares over on Facebook, I'll share an offer code for our on-demand service, half price for 3 months. Let's get back chatting to Art.
I went through my transition training, was and then assigned to VMA 231, the Ace of Spades Squadron, and my skipper at the time was W.R. Spicer, legend in the Marine Corps. And my welcome aboard was him yelling at me, standing up. The only thing protecting me from physical harm was his desk. He threatened to kill me in the checkerboard brief. He actually did throw me out of his office, and then made me his assistant, and, right next to him as the administration officer. And he believed that the Marines, it had to be a weapon system. You had to be able to deploy. You had to be able to operate from austere sites, because he just came out of Vietnam. It was Force Recon, enlisted, and then went back and be 2 tours as a pilot, flying helicopters. And we practiced packing up, deploying to someplace in the United States, unpacking, operating out of whatever you brought. If you didn't bring it, you didn't have it. You weren't going to go down to Kmart or Walmart to get it. You had to do without. And next time, don't be so crazy. And pack back up, come back, and then a couple of weeks later, we do the whole thing all over again. We were on ship. We were at airfields. We bombed 7 days a week, pretty much 7 days a week. But we flew 7 days a week. We bombed 5 days a week while we're back. Once the week work was over, he had us go on a cross country to get extra flight time because the Harrier does not have very long legs. 45 minutes. Our typical sortie with tanks was 45 minutes, 0.8. Where somebody flying the A4 would get a 1.2, 1.3. So we weren't building the flight time like the A4 guys were. And he says, the only way you got to do is go on a cross country. So we would go on a cross country and be expected to come back with at least 10 hours of flight time and actually do low level navigation on the cross countries. So that was my first introduction to the Harrier, and it was drinking from a fire hose and doing everything that the airplane could do.
And there's an awful lot.
And I tell you what, I'm thankful for that because a lot of people didn't get that trial by fire.
Interesting. And it sounds like, yeah, talk about fire. The versatility of that aircraft throws an awful lot as a pilot to deal with, to learn, to manage. It must have been, yeah, trial by fire indeed. Yeah, interesting. And I can understand, having gone through that, how you're then bitten, how you must have fallen in love with that aeroplane.
I did. I've had the great fortune throughout the military to fly. I don't know what the number is. I actually stopped counting. I say the number 85. It's probably above that, somewhere between 85 and 95 different types of airplanes. The Harrier is my absolute favorite, and that's the benchmark that I compare everything else to. Before I actually flew, I had a chance to talk with John Farley about his philosophy, and I told him I had bought a Sea Harrier, and he says, well, you bought the best of breed. He said, let me tell you, they're not all the same, but the Sea Harrier in particular, that was his favorite, and it's become my favorite too. Because of the raised canopy, the visibility is a little bit better. He thought the flight controls were a little bit better. I didn't have the experience at the time as a young lieutenant flying to realize, but now I know now, having flown the AV-8B and the Sea Harrier and the AV-8A, the Sea Harrier, I can hover it hands off, trim it up and take my hands right off the stick and it'll hover just fine. And it drifts with the wind a little bit. That's okay. And I really, really, really do like the way it flies.
Tell me about the restoration, and I call it a restoration, but bringing that aircraft back to flying status.
Restoration may be inaccurate. It was preparation for civilian flight because the outside of the airplane looks basically stock. Okay, we were missing a few parts. A pylon cover, we made one of those out of some fiberglass. That's non-structural or whatnot. We took out a lot of extra wiring that we didn't need. I think it was 40 or 50 pounds of wiring. It doesn't have a radar in the nose, so we had to replace that with about 66 pounds of ballast to get it to where. Actually, we started with 80, and then I took some of it out. I didn't like the way it flew. And we've got a civilian radio, civilian GPS. We took the head-up display out after the very first flight. It did not work, and it was 48 pounds of extra weight that if it's not going to work, we're not going to put it in there. And my landing aid, a lot of the F-30 pilots, 530 pilots, are a lot of suppressor. I've got a piece of black tape across the windscreen that, setting on the ground statically, will be this far below the horizon, and I just put it on the horizon. The airplane doesn't care what airspeed it lands at. It could land at 0 or 180 knots, just as long as it's at this attitude and the main gear touches down first. And so I just set the attitude and roll the airplane on the ground. That's the way I fly it.
Fantastic. And it must have been, I mean, there is still great love for the Harrier in the UK, of course, but in America as well. The reception must have been amazing, taking that aircraft around the air shows around the US.
We're the rock star at the air show. There's no question about it. To the point that one of the first air shows we did, we were getting ready to fly, and there was a civilian performer flying. Just as soon as we started the APU, it's noticeable sound. The crowd started like a tsunami. I was unaware, I was oblivious to it because I'm going through checks and looking at temperatures and stuff. But one of my buddies was an observer, and he just watched the way the crowd came over there. People were coming out of the porta potties. They were getting out of line to get a corn dog. And they just, a tsunami of people that came over there to watch us. And we later became aware that that's unfair of us to some of my friends that are performing. You know, that there's some of my friends too, and they're doing a good job, and they're up there. So we modified the way we do this. We tried to be off to the side or something, or make that part of make sure that the air boss knows that as soon as we hit that start button, the crowd's going to stop paying attention to the other performers, and they're going to be looking at this. So we build that into the schedule, and we can go through our checks in about 2 minutes. It's under 2 minutes because I don't have any INS to align, not any weapon systems to arm. By the time the engine's running, the GPS is already up. We do go through the functional checks of making sure we don't have any leaks, nothing's on fire, and the hydraulic system's working away. But basically, I'm ready. As soon as I start, I'm ready to taxi. So we modified our start procedure to not infringe upon another pilot's time when they're flying.
All good things must come to an end then, and I know the aircraft are now up for sale. When's the last time the aircraft flew?
Well, there's an interested buyer from the UK. There were a couple from the United States that we put them on the market at the wrong time with COVID. That shut down the air show industry, and I made it absolutely clear to the broker I wasn't going to sell the airplane to anybody just because they could write a check for it. It had to be the right person. It had to be the right person that I could pass the torch to, that I could, while I can still legally train somebody to fly, I could teach them to handle the airplane safely and competently, and would be part of the deal as a consultant, as an advisor, as a ground observer, in some capacity like that. But it wasn't going to be just someone with an ego and a checkbook that I was going to sell to. That wasn't going to happen. And we've had a couple interested persons from the United States. We had 2 calls on one day recently, actually, and that got me thinking. It's been on the market for a while, and we get 2 calls in one day. What is happening on the international market that would stimulate that interest? And I think that drove more interest in the 2-seater. The 2-seater, I think, is really the valuable part of this. We're very close to flying. There's no reason we cannot fly it. The U.S. government's going to let us do it. We've got experience in doing it. It's not a new thing, and we've got everything we need to get that airplane in the air. We've just sort of stalled it for the past couple of years due to finances and some other stuff. We've got ejection seats. We've got we had some problems with the hydraulic actuators for the ailerons. We got those. We got new ones of those and installed, and that's quite a job. We've installed our emergency blowdown system. So the 2-seater is the real value of the package in my mind, because that would allow me to safely train somebody so they could fly. And we're making the cockpits identical. The front cockpit of the 2-seater will be the same as the single-seater, so that it will be transparent.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned an interested party in the UK. I can certainly imagine a few people in the UK who might be interested, but what would stop the Sea Harrier flying in the UK? Are you familiar enough with the regulations over here?
Dan Griffith and I tried this several years ago. We petitioned the CAA to bring it back and fly it, and we had a large package, and they asked a bunch of questions. We had to analyze previous accidents, what happened, what's been fixed to prevent that again, and it all hinged on original contractor support.
Yeah.
They used the question. The question was, who is going to support this? And I'm not sure we understood what the question was for support. What they meant by that was Rolls-Royce and British Aerospace. And the Hunter accident, Rolls-Royce had, it's my understanding, they had 11 lawsuits for an airplane they hadn't touched and didn't have any responsibility for over decades, yet they were still sued by that. So, and you could probably throw Martin Baker into the mix with that as well, that they would be terrified of a lawsuit should something happen. And my response to that was, well, can we sign away, can we release liability in some way, have a lawyer draw up some document and I'll sign it, that I don't think that's going to happen. And when we purchased the two-seater, there was an original clause in that document that we needed to obtain an insurance policy to indemnify the seller on the order of 100 million pounds. And that seems like a large number to me. And we were able to remove that clause because, first of all, I don't think you could get it. And second of all, the cost would be unbelievably prohibitive. So it may or may not happen. It would take a change in mindset, I would think. And maybe that's happened now because there's a couple of people trying to fly a two-seater in the UK. Maybe things have changed. Maybe people say, well, based on what these guys have done in the United States, and we're hoping that our record of 14 years of doing it can help build a case. We fly it different than the military does. First of all, we're not going to do an air show in bad weather. Very few air shows are done off of a carrier launch. And the emergency procedure really for almost everything is stop and land. We could have an emergency, and we've had one during an actual air show where we stopped and landed and the crowd didn't know any difference. Because you come into a hover and you land and say, well, the air show's a little shorter today, and the crowd doesn't know any different. They still think it was a great air show.
Art, thank you so much for taking the time. I hope I know that people will have enjoyed this tremendously. So thank you for filling in a little bit of the hole that the air show season has sadly left us this year.
Well, it's been my pleasure, and I'll tell you what, the air show industry is going to come back. It's just this is a speed bump. You just have to get through this. A vaccine is on the horizon, and it'll be no different than any other illnesses out there. Get vaccinated for it and you'll be good to go. Air show season will be back. People will be able to social distance. Be able to get together without social distancing. We'll get through all this stuff and we'll return. There'll be a lot of great airplanes and great performers out there wowing the crowds just like we've done before.
Fantastic. It's a wonderful note of optimism to end. Thank you again, Art, for the time, and we'll chat again soon, I hope.
You're welcome. Take care.
Yeah, fantastic note of optimism to end on from Art there, and I admire that optimism, and I certainly hope that is the case for our airshow season next year. A couple of questions over on YouTube. Am I excited to get back to airshows? I am. Fingers crossed. Let's hope we get that. What was I going to say? Oh yes, 10 minutes time we'll have the RAF Harrier display 2006. Talk through the full display with in-cockpit views. I hope you enjoyed some of those in-cockpit views of Art's routine over in the US. I think that was Dover. Actually, I'm not sure where the Dover Air Force Base, I think. Someone can correct me. We're going ahead. We've done a lot of Navy Harrier action, haven't we? We've had Sea Harrier and the Matador. Let's get things back to the RAF for the sort of tail end of this broadcast. Do stick around to the end. I'll just have one final note from the guys with the Kestrel and a potentially exciting pipe dream for the future with that one, and we'll finish the display from one last word from Art, which I enjoyed hearing. So to the RAF, but back into our archive, heading back to Farnborough in 1994 for I think it would have been an RAF display, but I suppose it could have conceivably have been British Aerospace demonstrating the aircraft itself. Again, someone who wasn't 10 years old at the time can let me know. Let's take a look at that display.
This GR7 of the RAF, flown by Flight Lieutenant Rob Lee, has a new supercritical wing holding 50% more fuel and larger flaps linked to nozzle deflection for better short takeoff and landing. With leading-edge route extensions and lift improvement devices, these improvements give it twice the range or twice the load of the earlier versions. The larger, better vision cockpit gives room for improved avionics, and the Harrier 7 is now fully equipped for night attack tasks.
Nice shiny looking Harrier there. We'll head to 1996 now. One of the things that we did see on quite a few occasions is touch and goes on the grass at airfields. I've got some material in the archive from Mildenhall, seeing that, and Waddington as well. Not places I think have a grass runway sort of on the day to day. This one though is a really interesting display from the Shuttleworth collection, Old Warden in 1996. 94, forgive me, and the aircraft landing on, taxiing around and enjoying the fun of the fair on the ground at Shuttleworth. Let's take a look at that before in a moment we'll head for the full talk through of a Harrier display from 2006 from Pete Keenlyside in just a minute's time.
But if all that's nearly put you to sleep, prepare to be woken up.
Don't worry, we will get to the Harrier in a moment.
The military air days usually welcome some modern RAF metal, this one a Jaguar from number 16 Reserve Squadron at Lossiemouth. This Harrier GR7 hails from just a few miles further up the A1 from Old Warden, number 1 Squadron at RAF Wittering. The Harrier must be the heaviest aircraft to have touched down at Old Warden, although a Varsity did do a touch and go in the early 80s.
Ah, de Havilland. Well, almost. The Nimrod is a development of the Comet airliner.
The sound of Sean Maffett enjoying the sight of the Nimrod there. I couldn't resist including the Jaguar at the beginning, the Nimrod at the end, all things that we so enjoyed seeing at air shows in the 90s. And you can, of course, see in our archive of programmes which are available on PTV On Demand. That's the subscription service that gives access to our back catalogue dating back to the early 90s, late 80s. I will share an offer code if we hit that 100 likes on YouTube to give you half price access to that service. We're on 60 likes at the moment, and we had 23 shares. I've just seen a relative of mine join the stream, so David, do give the stream a share, and if we hit 50 shares I am going to share an offer code. Very sharing today, aren't we? Let's share one last dip into the archive from 2006. This is a good 17-minute chunk of a full Harrier display. So it's gosh, what's his name? Better get it right. Pete Keenlyside displaying the Harrier in 2006. It's conceivable that it's 2005, but I've got it labelled as 2006. Onboard views throughout, so a combination of a view from the cockpit camera and the head-up display. And I think it gives a really good insight into what it's like throwing an aircraft through a display routine. We'll coming to the end, and we will end with some sad sights of the RF Harriers ending their flying days at Cottesmore. But in the meantime, let's head back to the more, the days when the aircraft was very much operational, but still able to display at air shows.
Yeah, the Harrier is a fantastic aeroplane to fly. It's very demanding. It's a hard work to learn, but it truly is a pilot's aeroplane. And what makes it so is its unique capability to hover, to land in a short runway as short as 1,000 feet, which can be prepared anywhere in the world, or to vertically land on an aircraft carrier. All these things make it a very unique aeroplane and very exhilarating to fly. Okay, the Harrier is still one of the prime aircraft in the Royal Air Force. It's used primarily for close air support. It's on operations in Afghanistan at present, helping all the British and NATO troops out in Afghanistan. I myself have operated the Harrier both in Iraq and Afghanistan over the last 3 years, whilst operating as a pilot on for Army Cooperation Squadron. I've now moved on to the Harrier conversion unit, and I'm now teaching the next generation of Harrier pilots who will find themselves in Afghanistan in the not too distant future. Every display that I do starts off with a very detailed planning process, followed by a detailed briefing given by the display organisers. And that's done in good time so that I'm able to walk to the aircraft long before I need to get airborne. I normally start my engines approximately 20 minutes before takeoff. That's to allow plenty of time for all the post-start checks, followed by all the time it takes to taxi. So by the time I get out to the aircraft, it'll already have been prepared and ready for flight by my team of 5 engineers. I take 5 engineers away so that I can have one of each trade. So I have someone to deal with engines, airframes, an armourer who will deal with the canopy and the ejection seat, someone who deals with electrics, and someone who deals with avionics. So therefore, if anything goes wrong, hopefully we've got the right expertise on site so we can fix the aeroplane quickly and hopefully get it ready in time for the display. 2 of those engineers will help me get into the aeroplane, help me strap in, and then monitor me as I start the engine, and then taxi me out towards the holding points.
Harrier, Carolina.
Harrier, roger. Can you accept an immediate Sea Vixen inbound?
Harrier, accept.
Harrier, roger. Cleared immediate takeoff, surface wind 320 degrees 9.
Takeoff, Harrier.
China 1, land initially north of the runway on the grass area, just north of the runway.
Flight 1, land north side.
Sea Vixen, continue approach, Harrier departing immediate.
Vixen, visual.
Now I'm cleared for takeoff. I can do my last minute pre-takeoff checks before launching into the display. Now charging down the runway, quickly accelerating to 100 knots, where I'll move the nozzle lever aft, and I'm now airborne. I'm nozzling aft, making the aircraft a conventional aeroplane, and bringing the gear up.
Display, Harrier.
Harrier, good afternoon. We are on time. It appears to display on time. And the surface wind down on the seafront, 280 degrees, 14 knots.
Harrier, cleared on time.
I'm now running in towards the display. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the Mach number. So I'm doing 0.65 the speed of sound. And below that is the G. So at the minute I'm not really pulling much G at all, just 1.2, and you'll see that increase significantly as we go into the display. I'm now descending down towards my running height of 100 feet and accelerating up towards approximately 530 knots. I'm lined up with the orange markers and the orange barges, which denotes the 230 metre display line. At crowd centre, I'm now pulling up into a half Cuban. You can see that I've now pulled at 6. The bottom of the screen, it says I've pulled max G of 6.5. Pulling G is, 6.5 G is quite a lot, but it's as you go through training, you get very used to it. We wear G pants that help give us some G protection, and you do have to strain your muscles to keep the blood in the top half of your body as you pull G. But it's something as you're doing the display you don't really have to think about because you get so used to it. Now I've finished my inverted pass and I'm pulling up for a reverse wing over to approach the crowd on the 45-degree line. Now looking over my shoulder to pick up crowd centre as I descend towards 500 feet on the 45-degree line. And now pitching up for a 270-degree roll and a brake at crowd centre. At this point I still have the air brake out because I ran into the display with a little bit too much fuel. I'm using full power against air brake to reduce the amount of fuel I have when I come into the hover. I'm now braking at crowd centre back out onto the 45, where I'll pull up for a reverse wing over to come in on the B axis, which is 90 degrees to the crowd. I'm lined up 90 degrees to the crowd with 750 metres to go. I'm going to pull up for a quarter clover. As I hit the vertical, I roll through 90 degrees and then pull down towards the horizon. As I hit the horizon, I will bunt to -1G, so I am extending into wind. And now I'm committing to the pull through, pulling through for the rest of the quarter clover. I'm going to bottom out 500 feet at crowd centre and brake back out onto the 45° away from the crowd. Before pulling up for a reverse wing over, I'm selecting idle and air brake, and I'm slowing down as I decelerate towards the hover. As I get halfway around this turn, I'm now deflecting the nozzles into the braking stop, which means the nozzles are actually pointing forward vertically down, so as I power up I'm actually getting thrust pointing forwards, which is helping me decelerate. I'm now slowing down rapidly. In the bottom left you can see the ground speed slowing through 90, and eventually that will slow to 0 as I come into the stationary hover. I'm monitoring my engine performance, and I've just made the aircraft demineralised water system flow, which is now cooling the engine and giving me more thrust. As I come into the hover now, I'm going to leave half braking stop, so I've got 10 degrees of nozzles pointing forward, and as I now accelerate rearwards towards 30 miles an hour backwards. The aircraft carries 90 seconds worth of water, and I can see that on a gauge in the cockpit, and it's important I monitor that so I know when the aircraft is about to run out of water, and as it does I can assess the temperature of the engine and make a decision as to whether it's okay to remain in the hover as the water runs out. And today I can that deedle there, that is the water with 15 seconds to go, and I'm now assessing the engine, and I decide that it's okay to continue the hover once the water has run out. I'm now carrying out a 270 pedal turn to face crowd centre. See, the water has now run out, the W has disappeared from the HUD, and the engine's heated up. You can see that by the larger hexagon bottom left hand corner. I'm now selecting full braking stop, letting the aircraft move backwards. I'm then lowering the nose for the famous Harrier bow. I raise the nose, I leave a bit of braking stop in as I let the aircraft come to a halt, ground speed 0, and I deselect braking stop. I then apply right bank as the aircraft starts to move sideways. I'm monitoring my engine performance all the time. The engine's quite hot right now, but it's suitable to continue. And you can tell the engine's quite hot by the hexagon bottom left hand. When that reaches a full hexagon, that's about my limit of performance for going sideways. I'm now applying left bank to bring the aircraft to a halt. I'm now going to apply more power and carry out a 450 climbing pedal turn to the left. And you can see that extra power by the hexagon plus a bit in the bottom left hand corner. I'm now controlling that to a sensible level with throttle, and I'll stop the yaw now with right rudder. I'm now starting to move the nozzles aft, letting the aircraft accelerate, and as I start to get a little bit of airspeed, I start to raise the nose and accelerate away in a climbing transition. So I'm now climbing 25 nose up, but I'm still only doing 50 miles an hour over the ground. As I move the nozzles aft, I leave the nozzles down a little bit, and this gives me reaction controls so I can fly the aircraft at slow speed. I'm now bunting the aircraft over to level. The aircraft is now accelerating rapidly. I move the nozzles out, and that's the Harrier display complete. So I'm now bringing it into the hover at Southend Airport. I'm using approximately half braking stops. I've got 10 degrees of nozzles pointing forwards of vertical, and you can see the bottom left, the speed slowing until the ground speed reaches approximately 0. I'm now turning the aircraft to face the crowds at the airport, and then I'll do a little bow to 20 degrees nose down before raising the nose, turning towards the runway and landing as I reach my absolute fuel minimum for landing. I'll put the aircraft back into the braking stop, lower the nose for a steep landing, to land approximately halfway down the runway. And I'm aiming to be at 50 knots ground speed as I touch down. Okay, so I'm now going to taxi back towards my parking position. I'm doing various cockpit checks, and soon I'll see the ground crew who will start to taxi me into position to park. I'm supported at every airshow by a team of 5 engineers. Each set of 5 engineers comes from a larger team of 20 engineers on the squadron who volunteer to give up their weekends over the summer to support the Harrier display team. And without the support of these engineers, it would be impossible for us to take the Harrier display throughout the UK as we do every summer.
Well, what an engrossing bit of video that was. At least it was for me. I'm sure you too, to get that insight from the pilot of the flying display, from the onboard view, the HUD display particularly, and that management of engine temperature, throttle, speed, fuel, all the things that pilots considering that, I don't know, it's easy to forget there's that management going on while you're as a spectator of an air display. So hopefully entertaining. If you liked it, give the video a like. 91 likes on YouTube. We're close enough. We're going to get to 100, I'm sure. Do use the offer code Harrier. Original, hey? Over on watch.planestv.com, sign up for a Actually, it's signing up for a free trial, so you don't have to pay anything if you don't want to. Give it a whirl for 7 days and access our archive of 30 years of airshow action. Lots of this Harrier stuff included, but very, very many other programs as well. Lots of Vulcan material. I published a new program on there last week. So watch.planestv.com/Vulcan if you're interested in that particularly. But use the offer code Harrier with a capital H to get 3 months half price on the PTV On Demand service. I hope you're enjoying the stream. 100 likes, look at that, literally just hit it there. Fantastic, well done everyone, thank you for that support. And it's great, the numbers have skyrocketed just the last half an hour. We're not talking about the sorts of audience we get for a real air show, but hopefully this has been an entertaining couple of hours in place of, well, I don't suppose we'd have had any air shows at this time of year anyway, but I will continue these through the winter, and not as regularly, not weekly, like I was doing in the early part of the year. I'm trying to balance it with other jobs I have to do to keep a business going when we haven't had any air shows this year. But if you've got ideas, thank you Michael, by the way, who's emailed me his list of requests of live stream themes that he'd like to see. I do really appreciate the feedback there. He's asking for Shoreham Air Show, a look back to those events. Red Arrows, I'd love to do a Red Arrows themed show. A React look back, yes, talking about doing that. BBMF feature would be good. I like that. Maybe we can end with a mosquito restoration. You never know, you never know. What was I going to say? Yeah, those are great themes. The other one that keeps cropping up everywhere on the comments is tornado, and I'm thinking about doing one of those. Certainly F3 I'd love to do, but maybe an F3 versus GL4 one. We'll see. If you're not already subscribed on YouTube, do subscribe. I'm hoping to have a Rafale versus Typhoon video up next week. That's a collaboration with Hushkit. I don't know whether I should have revealed that yet. We're going to launch the two of them at the same time. I'm sure Joe won't mind. Hopefully next week. So do subscribe on YouTube. If you're watching on Facebook, you'll get that video as well. Actually, do like the page on Facebook. So hope we've covered various aspects of the Harrier. Focused on Sea Harrier, it has to be said, but that last RAF or Sea Harrier and Naval Harrier types. But now we're continuing the RAF theme and bringing things a bit more up to date. So it's 10 years ago now, but some of the last airshow displays we saw were that year. The aircraft retiring at the beginning of the next year actually, but was it the December? Someone can correct me in the chat. So we're heading to Dunsfold 2010. Dunsfold's cropped up a couple of times, but it seemed like a apposite air display to go and watch. And yeah, this flying display from that year. And you'll also see on the end of this material we recorded at Dunsfold pretty well 10 years exactly ago, marking that 10-year, would have been the 50-year anniversary of the first untethered flight of the P1127, first untethered hover I should say. And that material's on the end of this after the airshow sequence. And we get to hear from John Farley, Harrier test pilot, Hawker test pilot, and some of his insights about the aircraft. Hope you enjoy this.
As Steve Kenworthy arrived to close the show in the Harrier, he was not to know he was the RAF's last Harrier display pilot.
Yeah, this is an amazing place to be flying the Harrier in the Wings and Wheels show. It's obviously it's where the Harriers were born, so to be back here and flying a Harrier is a fantastic experience. Really, it's great to be here.
He said the Harrier, because when I saw it stop, fly backwards and fly sideways, then I knew I'd seen everything. And coming from a man with that much history, that's a lot.
It's 50 years since the first P1127 flew, and it's 50 years this year since the first vertical takeoff. But the jet you see behind me today, the Harrier GR9, is the latest incarnation of the Harrier. It's completely different to the original Harriers that flew in those early days. Whilst it might look slightly similar, and the basic layout of the airplane is the same, the engine's in the middle, it's got a high wing that has anhedral. The actual aeroplane to fly is completely different. It's a lot more stable than the original designs. There's a lot of technology in there making it more stable, but also the avionics, the systems, the navigation systems, the computers that we use to operate the aeroplane are completely different as well. And the capability of the jet is something that the old test pilots would probably not believe how much it's advanced. Actually, it's a combat-proven, modern, capable aeroplane it's got the capability to remain in service for a good few years yet and remain credible as well. Yes, we've been off the display circuit for a few years. I think the last time that we were here displaying at Dunsfold was in 2006 with now squadron leader Pete's Keenlyside, PK. But we were off the circuit for a few years because we spent 5 years in Afghanistan on combat operations supporting troops on the ground from NATO forces. And because of that commitment, which lasted for 5 years, as I say, we decided we couldn't afford to, not necessarily money, but in terms of priorities and jet allocations and pilots and engineers, we couldn't afford to do the display. But we came home from that last summer in July 09. Because we're home now, we haven't got such big commitments like we had a few years ago, so we can afford to run the display again, and it's great to be back on the circuit. The Harrier is certainly a crowd pleaser, and a lot of people come to an air show to see the Harrier fly, which is an amazing experience, really. The F-35's due in service in about 8 years' time, in 2018. which is the current expected date, it's going to bring a whole new generation of aviation and combat power to us, really, both to the Air Force and to the Navy. It's going to be a stealthy, extremely capable weapons platform. It's not going to be so much of a pilot's aeroplane as the Harrier is, where you're really having to concentrate on purely flying it. It's going to be a very automated aircraft that will largely fly itself. The pilot in the cockpit is there to manage the systems on board and to operate the systems in the correct tactical manner to get the best out of it. But that's a few years away yet, and there's plenty of life left in the Harrier still. So hopefully I'll stay flying the Harrier for a good few years.
We returned to Dunsfold on a cold and wet day in November 2010 for the 50th anniversary of the first flight of the Hawker P1127, the forerunner to the Harrier. Two aircraft from 4 Squadron visited the airfield as they were winding down from active duty. The event also hosted Harrier test pilots John Farley, Duncan Simpson and Chris Roberts amongst the invited guests. Gareth Stringer talked to John Farley.
John, this is a very special occasion, isn't it?
Well, certainly. I mean, Dunsfold was where the whole Harrier family started and got developed, and so, yes, it's wonderful to be back here again. It was just a very happy, small airfield to do development test flying from. I mean, there are some things in this life that shouldn't be done too much in the glare of publicity. I'm told political decision making, for example, sausage stuffing and test flying. You know, they're things you need to go away and do quietly by yourself, and Dunsfold was a wonderful place to do that.
The event made all the more poignant by the imminent retirement of the aircraft, which the aircrew by now were more than well aware of.
It is a very special day. We're just about at the 50th anniversary of the first Harrier hover here at Dunsfold. Our aeroplanes were built here, so we were very keen to come back, but clearly, we are sad that we're nearly at the end of UK V-style aviation. I've been flying the aeroplane since 1994. I've came straight through training, always been a Harrier pilot, and I'm now the commanding officer of what was the conversion unit, the training unit. We're not training anybody anymore, so we're spending our final days supporting the Army as they get ready to go out on Op Eric.
It was the end of an era for the RAF and the end of one at Dunsfold, the home of the Harrier, where it's always been welcomed. Whilst the Harrier will not be back next year, the rest of us will, for another Wings and Wheels.
Yeah, wonderful sights there, and gloomy conditions, weren't they, filming there, but the wet runway, showing off one of the other aspects of Harrier displays at air shows over the years, because occasionally we do get rain at air shows, don't we, ladies and gentlemen? Air shows, what are they? Well, we're going to end with the final RAF Harrier flights recorded in December 2010. The event at Cottesmore, getting 16 aircraft up, and we don't actually see the formation of the aircraft, but it's a nice piece, and we'll get to hear from my old man as well. He does a good job of presenting this, but do stick around for after that. We'll have one last word from the guys at Wings Museum about their Kestrel Restoration and where things might head in the very, very long future ahead. Long future ahead, dear oh dear. Hey, someone sent them a tenner. Well done, Yvette, over on GoFundMe. If you'd like to support that Kestrel project that we talked about earlier, do find the Wings Museum on social media. It would be wonderful to think that these live broadcasts could have a positive effect on restoration projects like that, especially when those museums are closed and not generating revenue from visitors. It would be nice to think that these live streams could have a beneficial effect like that. So yep, you'll find the details of the GoFundMe for that Kestrel Restoration in the description below, and I'd love to see a few donations go in today. I'll be donating a bit today. If you do want to support what we do, you can leave a super chat over on YouTube, and I'll make sure to give you a shout out before the broadcast ends if you do that. And you can send us stars over on Facebook. I'll donate half of whatever's generated from those, and maybe I'll round it up a bit as well to the Kestrel Restoration on the GoFundMe there. I think PlanesTV should chip in a bit for the restoration, given the guys gave a bit of time yesterday to talk to us and fill us in on the history of that aircraft. What was I going to say? the best way of supporting me is to become a PTV On Demand subscriber over on watch.planestv.com, and because we've had so many likes and shares, use the offer code Harrier on watch.planestv.com, and that will get you your first 3 months at half price. That's for new subscribers only, I should say. So let's go now to Cottesmore. There'll be a little bit of repetition here with chats with John Farley and the squadron commander, was it? But you know, the material of the final RAF Harrier flights, I think, worthy of inclusion here. As I say, stick around to the end. We'll get one last word from the Kestrel Restoration chaps, and also one last word from Art at the very end.
We're here at RAF Cottesmore on a bitterly cold December 15th, and we're here to say goodbye to the Harrier. They're hoping to fly a 16-ship formation, but the cloud is very low. But if they can put 16 aircraft in the air, well, that will be a feat worth coming to watch.
I've been in the Air Force for coming up to 13 years now. I was originally a creamy QFI on the Hawk at Valley, which is so I went through flying training, got my wings, and then became an instructor on the Hawk straight away. Since then, I've been flying the Harrier. I've been doing that for 6 years, and this year I'm obviously the display pilot. It's 50 years since the first P1127 flew, and it's 50 years this year since the first vertical takeoff. But the jet you see, the Harrier GR9, is the latest incarnation of the Harrier. The actual aeroplane to fly is completely different. It's a lot more stable than the original designs. The pilot in the cockpit is there to manage the systems on board and to operate the systems in the correct tactical manner to get the best out of it.
Harry will be no more on these shores, and that's going to be a very sad day.
Yes, it is, but I think I'm a bit more cross than I'm sad. I mean, there are 5 other countries still flying the aeroplane, and I think the fact that the United Kingdom is stopping flying its last 80 perhaps says more about the United Kingdom than it does about the aeroplane, to be honest. Early 70s, when we were taking the aeroplane to the Paris Air Show on a regular basis, Paris and Farnborough, because the world didn't know about jump jets then, you know. And this particular Paris, I think it was either 71 or 73, I was doing a Harrier display every afternoon, but we had a Hurricane with us, PZ865, the last one built, and I flew a Hurricane display in the morning and a Harrier display in the afternoon, and I thought, I'm getting paid for this. That was a good week, that was. Gordon Lewis, who designed the very first Pegasus, he died a few weeks ago, but he did a brilliant job in conceiving that engine. The external size of the latest Pegasus, the hole it's got to fit into in the airplane, has hardly changed, you know, in 40 odd years. But the thrust has gone up 2.5 times, and that's been the achievement of the engine manufacturer.
I've been flying the airplane since 1994. I've came straight through training, always been a Harrier pilot, and I'm now the commanding officer of what was the conversion unit, the training unit. We're not training anybody anymore, so we're spending our final days supporting the Army as they get ready to go out on Op Herrick. Seeing operations in the Balkans through the 90s. At the end of the 90s, we were flying off the carriers into Iraq, trying to get Saddam to let the weapons inspectors back in. Op Herrick in 2003, to remove Saddam Hussein from power, and then clearly we spent 5 years operating in Afghanistan. It is a very special day. We're just about at the 50th anniversary of the first Harrier hover, but clearly, yeah, we are sad that we're at the end of UK VSTOL aviation.
And that was that. A sad day, but hopefully enjoyable sights. Enjoyable? Sad sights? Don't know. I hope you've enjoyed today. It's been wonderful seeing people joining, and there's a bit more to come. A little bit more of potential news from the Kestrel guys, and also we'll finish off with Art Nalls. Thank you everyone for joining. Really enjoy doing these. It's fantastic to talk to people in the chat, and if you haven't already said hello, do. We've got people from Kenya, from India, spread around the UK, a couple of people from Scotland. Lovely to hear from you guys, and a few family members joining, which is always nice to see. Obviously everyone living in a bit of a weird situation at the moment, so I am trying to do more of these. It won't be weekly, but thank you for all the suggestions on themes that I might take up. I will be in touch soon via the email newsletter, which you can sign up via the link in the description soon, to talk about what we might have coming up in future. Lovely to hear from everyone again. Thank you, Andy, for your kind words. And Cottesmore, sad to see it go. And Michael, he's stuck with us for the whole old stream. Michael, thank you for that. So what did I want to say? Yeah, sign up for the email newsletter in the description below. There's a link in the description below. If you'd like to support us but also get access to our archive of airshow action, head over to watch.planestv.com, and if you're not already a subscriber, you can use the coupon code Harrier to get your first 3 months at half price. Thank you everyone. This is it. So we'll hear just one last little bit from the Kestrel guys. Hopefully it explains itself, and one last note from Art. It's been wonderful chatting to you all. Thanks again. I'll see you at an airshow soon. Cheerio. I should say I mentioned that I was chatting to you guys today, to Art yesterday, and I said they're restoring a Kestrel, and the first thing he says was, to fly? You should see the pictures.
If he wants to support us, we've got an engine.
Well, he's got loads like that.
We've got a Pegasus 5.
So
very early one.
Right. So that would have been using Kestrels and
P1127s and Kestrels.
I suppose that is something that we didn't mention. Actually, was the engine that we acquired.
Okay. Yeah. So. Okay. So. Is it far too ambitious to say, get the engine in there, but to conceivably ever run it in that airframe? Is that just totally...
No, it needs a complete rewire, because the electronics side, the avionics and all that are just completely shot. But it's something to work towards the future. It would be nice. I need to boroscope the engine to make sure it's okay. But we actually found it at Gatwick Aviation Museum just up the road.
Fantastic. Yeah.
You wouldn't believe. They needed an engine for their GR3. The Pegasus 5 doesn't fit in the GR3 because the engine mounts are in a different location. So we went and purchased I think it was a 103 for them. Yeah. And we did a swap.
Yeah, we had to go to Holland to collect it, was part of the deal.
Okay. Yeah, fair dues. Hey, I love this world. I'd love to touch base with you again, in the future, see how you're getting on. And it's wonderful hearing these little stories of trades going on and the negotiations. And I'll make sure to forward the link to the stream tomorrow to the RAF Museum guy I know. Yeah. We never know. That'd do some good. Well, thanks again, gents. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, I'm going to have a drink.